Carl Jung said, "I am not what has happened to me. I am what I choose to become." This powerful quote leads us to reflect on the weight of our past experiences and how they shape our perception of ourselves. We often get stuck in the wounds we carry, the pain and trauma that seem to define us, believing that we are the inescapable result of what we have lived through. But for Jung, the path to true freedom begins with accepting our wounds, not denying or running away from them. Throughout life, we accumulate emotional scars. These wounds can come from rejections, failures, childhood traumas, or experiences that have shaken our identity. Each one carries a piece of our history, and ignoring or suppressing them is a way of distancing ourselves from who we really are. For Jung, however, these wounds are portals to self-knowledge. They reveal hidden aspects of our psyche and, when looked at head-on, offer us the opportunity for healing and growth. Acceptance of these wounds is an essential step in the process of individuation, which is the path to becoming whole and aware of our true selves. This process involves integrating all parts of ourselves, including those we prefer to hide, our shadow, as Jung called it. The shadow is made up of the aspects of our personality that we reject or deny, often as a result of our emotional wounds. But it is only by accepting these parts, our pains, flaws, and imperfections, that we can free ourselves from the invisible chains that bind us to an unresolved past. Therefore, the freedom that Jung proposes is not an escape from suffering, but a liberation that comes from a profound encounter with it. To accept our wounds is to recognize that they are part of us, but they don't have to define us. They are part of the journey, but not the final destination. And by accepting them, we begin healing, a transformation towards our completeness. So what does it mean to accept your wounds? What role do they play in the construction of your identity and the search for freedom? These are the questions we will explore throughout this video. To understand the depth of what Jung means by accepting wounds, we need to understand the concept of individuation. This is one of the pillars of analytical psychology, the process by which a person becomes who they really are, differentiating themselves from the mass of the collective unconscious and integrating the unconscious aspects of their psyche. Emotional wounds play a central role in this process, as they often represent fragments of our psyche that have not been properly integrated. When we suffer a trauma or face emotionally difficult situations, we create defenses to protect our conscious identity. Many of these defenses involve repressing painful feelings or dissociating traumatic experiences. However, what is repressed does not disappear. As Jung taught us, repressed content goes into the unconscious, forming our shadow, a repository of denied aspects of ourselves. The shadow contains everything we can't accept about ourselves, whether it's impulses, personality traits, or, in the case we're analyzing, emotional wounds. The difficulty in integrating these aspects occurs because our conscience, through defense mechanisms, judges them as unacceptable or unwanted. The irony, however, is that the more we deny or resist our wounds, the more power they exert over us. This is where acceptance of wounds becomes the path to healing. Jung believed that true healing can only happen when we are willing to confront these painful aspects of our history. This doesn't mean reliving the trauma or getting stuck in the pain, but rather recognizing that these experiences are part of who we are. By confronting our wounds, we recognize that they have a message, a hidden lesson that can guide us in the process of individuation. This confrontation is an invitation to deep self-knowledge. Instead of seeing wounds as weaknesses, we can see them as opportunities for growth. They reveal the blind spots in our psyche, the areas that need attention and healing, so that we can become whole. Jung said that what we deny in ourselves returns in the form of destiny. In other words, if we don't face our wounds, they will continue to shape our lives without us having any control over them. Acceptance, then, is the first step towards transformation. Let's bring this concept into everyday reality. Imagine a person called Anna. Since childhood, Anna has lived in an emotionally unstable family environment. Her parents often fought, and she, like many children, interpreted this dysfunction as her fault. Over the years, Anna developed a deep emotional wound linked to rejection and the fear of not being worthy of love. In adulthood, this wound manifested itself in her relationships. She felt anxious, constantly seeking approval from others, and avoiding conflict at all costs. However, Anna was not fully aware that these reactions were a response to her wound. She believed that her need to please and avoid confrontation was just part of her personality, a defining characteristic. Anna's shadow made up of her insecurity and her fear of rejection, controlled her in a subtle but powerful way. As long as these wounds remained buried, she would continue to repeat destructive patterns, unable to form healthy and authentic relationships. This is a classic example of how emotional wounds, when not accepted or integrated, shape our actions, behaviors, and even our beliefs about ourselves. Anna's shadow contained all these unprocessed emotions and experiences. To achieve true emotional freedom, she would first need to acknowledge the existence of this shadow and the pain it had buried. The healing process for Anna would not be easy. Accepting her wounds would involve revisiting painful emotions and understanding how her personal history had shaped her worldview. However, by accepting that her wounds didn't define her and that they were part of her journey of self-knowledge, Anna could begin to change. She would understand that her patterns of behavior were not a reflection of who she essentially was, but rather responses learned from her pain. Once Anna recognizes her wounds and accepts them, she begins to free herself from the need to please everyone and the fear of being rejected. She learns to express her emotions more authentically, to set boundaries, and to seek healthier relationships that are not based on her insecurity, but on her truth. This example illustrates how accepting wounds is not a weakness, but a demonstration of courage. Accepting our wounds is the first step towards freeing ourselves from the unconscious control they have over our lives. By accepting our wounds, we connect with a healing process that goes beyond the individual and touches on Jung's concept of the collective unconscious. According to this theory, the collective unconscious is made up of universal memories and experiences that share symbols and archetypes present in all cultures and times. Personal wounds, therefore, are not just isolated events, but resonate with collective wounds that humanity shares over time. An example of this is the archetype of the wounded healer, symbolized by the figure of Chiron in Greek mythology, which Jung incorporated into his thinking. Chiron, wounded by a poisoned arrow, was unable to heal himself, but developed exceptional wisdom and healing abilities to help others. This archetype reflects a profound truth. It is often our own wounds that give us the ability to understand and heal the pain of others. By accepting our wounds, we not only begin our own healing work, but we also become a source of healing for the collective, for the people around us. This archetype touches on the idea that true freedom comes not from denying our vulnerability, but from embracing it. The process of individuation, which is the path to the full realization of the self, requires us to confront both personal wounds and the larger themes that are part of the human experience. In dealing with our inner pain, we resonate with universal themes of suffering, healing, rejection, and redemption, which are present in the collective unconscious. In addition, the process of accepting our wounds leads us to the integration of archetypes. Jung believed that within each of us live fundamental archetypes, such as the hero, the sage, the lover, and the puer aeternos, the eternal adolescent. Each of these archetypes carries potential and challenges, and when we are stuck in our pain, we tend to live a distorted version of them. For example, the wounded hero can become the martyr, the one who suffers in silence in an attempt to save the world without ever recognizing their own need for help. Accepting the wounds means freeing these archetypes from suffering and allowing them to express their qualities in a more balanced way. The integrated hero is not the one who runs away from their internal battles, but the one who faces their pain and emerges transformed. Healing begins with the individual, but reverberates in the soul of the world. The process of accepting wounds is both deeply personal and universal. By confronting and integrating the most painful parts of ourselves, we open the way to true freedom and self-knowledge. As Jung taught us, individuation, the process of becoming who we really are, can only happen when we are willing to descend into the depths of the psyche and face our shadows, our wounds, and everything we deny about ourselves. But this acceptance does not mean resignation. On the contrary, it is an act of power. To accept our wounds is to recognize our human vulnerability, and paradoxically, it is from this vulnerability that our strength arises. When we face what hurts, we free ourselves from the invisible chains that bind us to repetitive and destructive behaviors. True freedom, according to Jung, is not the absence of pain, but the ability to experience it consciously and integrate it into our being. As in Anna's example, when we accept our wounds, we begin to understand that we are not defined by what has happened to us, but by how we choose to respond to it. By recognizing the pain, we embrace the opportunity for growth. Suffering ceases to be an unbearable burden and becomes a tool for inner transformation. Each wound carries a hidden learning, a key that allows us to access deeper aspects of our psyche and unlock dormant potential. This acceptance also connects us to the great collective journey of humanity. Like the wounded healer archetype, by integrating our wounds, we become more empathetic and able to understand the pain of others. Instead of isolating ourselves in our own pain, we open up to the world, recognizing that suffering is a shared experience. This strengthens us as individuals and connects us to something greater, the collective unconscious, where human experiences intertwine in a symbolic weave that unites us. Ultimately, accepting our wounds is what sets us free. It's what allows us to become whole, authentic, and aware of our true selves. As Jung said, "He who looks outward dreams, he who looks inward awakens." By looking inwards at our wounds, we awaken to the reality of who we are and open ourselves up to life with greater depth, purpose, and freedom. The final message is clear. Don't be afraid of your wounds. They are part of your story, but they don't have to be your prison. Welcome them, learn from them, and allow yourself to be transformed. Only then, by accepting your wounds, will you find the freedom you so desperately seek. Now we want to hear from you. What emotional experiences or wounds have marked your life? How have you dealt with them, and what have you learned in the process? Share your story, reflections, or questions in the comments. Remember, your experience can inspire and help others who are on this path of self-knowledge and healing.